Welcome everyone to Aurelia's Virtual Book Club. We have Sherwood Smith today, and I'm super excited to have her because she's been my favorite author since I was in middle school. Um, so I'm very excited. How long has it been since you've been writing and publishing?
I started writing as a little kid, like when I was 6. I started sending things to publishers when I was 13 because I had no idea how terrible they were. And I didn't start publishing until I was in my early 30s. So I was no child prodigy as far as publication is concerned. I stopped sending things out for 10 or 12 years because I figured I needed to learn something. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep getting rejected. I needed,
Right.
what I didn't know was I needed to learn how to rewrite.
Yeah. Well, I guess it worked.
Slowly, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way because I've had to learn as I go. Without any kind of feedback, I thought if you, as a writer, if you felt passionate about your work when you were writing it, automatically the passion would transfer itself to the page.
Well, I think the passion probably did, but maybe the clarity didn't.
No, I think in the years that I've been a workshop and a beta reader, workshop and a teacher, I've discovered that many times a writer would break down in tears and say, but I suffered so when I wrote that scene. I bawled my eyes out. And what we read on the page was straightforward cliches. The emotion wasn't there. The emotion had not got from the writer's brain onto the page. And that's a difficult thing to, especially for us visual writers, to learn how to use words that will get across what we are seeing, smelling, feeling. And
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still trying to learn it.
Well, I think you do a good job, but I'm a little bit biased.
Well,
so you were talking before about how this world that Sasharia En Garde is a part of is a world that you've been writing in and exploring your whole life.
yes.
So I'm curious, has being able to explore this world helped you in real life, and has real life influenced that world? Like, is there a connection between the two?
I think of them, I've thought of them as parallel tracking my entire life. I don't know that writing has helped me in my real life. There was a certain amount of familial and social pressure against it when I was young, when conformity was very important.
Right.
And people were assuming, helpful people would give me, what was that god-awful book? I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, thinking that I was taking drugs and going off into fantasy land. There were family members who, with reason, I see now in hindsight, thought I might be going along the track of my uncle who was schizophrenic. So from the outside, my sitting and staring into space at times when I was busy working on story inside my head,
Right.
like him when he was listening to the static on radio stations between stations and hearing the FBI telling him that they were listening in and he needed to go and slash the neighbor's tires or dig the bugs out of the mattresses and cut my grandmother's, bedding apart.
Yeah.
There's
I
a
had a really fascinating conversation with the book we read last month is called Broken by Angela B. Chrysler, and it's a very dark fictionalized memoir. But one
okay.
of the things we talked about, so warning, it's a tough read. But one of the things we talked about when I was interviewing her was dissociation and how
Yes.
when you have a mental illness, you're dissociating without control, not by choice. Whereas
Yes.
when you're exploring a world, whether you're reading or you're writing,
Yes.
you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it intentionally on purpose. And that
Yes.
was a really interesting thing to learn because it just was not made clear to me in that particular way before. Um,
I can relate to that a little bit. When I was a little kid, about the same time I was starting to write, when I was 6, I went through a period of lying like a rug. Um, I told such lies that I got in trouble at school. I changed my report card that year. Um, I just told all these lies. And considering the fact that most of the time when we got in trouble, we got beaten with a hanger or belt, the, the school authorities were very gentle. This was the 50s.
mm,
It was not a gentle time, but the women who were in charge of us were very, the principal was an older woman, she's probably my age. And then my first grade teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald, was probably in her 50s. And what they got me to see was the consequences of my lies. That when you get
mm,
caught, there are consequences. And I finally figured it out. And I think that's when I started realizing, well, if I write it in a story, then obviously I can't be it. I can't be what I'm pretending to be. But if I write in a story, nobody can change it. So I
right.
started putting all those wishes and wanting to be somebody else, something more interesting, wanting to have a different life into stories. And it might be related, although I had a certain amount of control. And I'm thinking about your author who wrote Broken and my uncle. And I think I was lucky because some people aren't able to make that distinction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it is interesting to think about because it, like what you were saying with your family and thinking from the outside, it looked like you were doing the same thing that he was doing when really the internal stuff was very different.
Yes, because nobody else in the family did what I was doing. It was weird to them. And it
Right.
was a time when conformity was very important. There was no, oh, be your own self. That's wonderful. Came along in the 70s and afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hmm. So with Sasharia En Garde in particular, um, you started it and then you put it aside and then you came back to it.
Right.
And that took you a long time. Um, and you mentioned that part of that was stuff that was going on in your actual life. So can you summarize sort of what that process was like for you?
Yeah, I started writing Sun's story when she was young.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I started it in Europe right after I wrote the first half of Crown Jewel.
Mm-hmm.
The second half I wrote a year later when I was back in California. At the time, the first half was the whole story, and the next one to come along was Sons. And even though I was in Europe, the setting for it was the Renaissance fair, although kind of Europeized.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that Sun is this California hippie, completely ignorant, much like me. And she meets a guy who's dressed like a prince, although he doesn't really look like one. He's got woolly hair and he's kind of awkward, but he's very sweet. And he's on Earth and he's looking around, just enjoying himself. Basically, he's run away from trouble at home. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
he takes her back, but I realized that the story was not going to have a good ending. It was going to be end up with him losing his kingdom and her running away in tears. And I thought, I'm not writing that. So I put it away and came back from Europe, went to grad school, worked in various jobs, bad and good, got married, had a kid. And all along during that time, I would take out these old stories that were half finished and look at them. Some I'd toss, and others I would read and go, I really like this. I want to finish it one day. Well, I did that with this one. And by then I had a daughter, and I could see from the mother's point of view and the daughter's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
When I first wrote it, it was just Son. Now Son was a mother and she had a daughter, and they get pulled back together. And I thought, oh, this is different. This is interesting. Let's run with it. And of course I did. And I figured out what had happened those years later, back in the old country.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of, I don't know, almost time travel, I guess. Not like actual time travel, but in terms of the story, it starts and then there's like a sort of an in-between time period. And then the rest of the story happens.
Yes.
So that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense though too, because like if Son comes back to Earth with her daughter, right, at the beginning, and then has to figure out what happened since the last time she was there. So you're sort of exploring and finding out what happened as she does, sort of. Yeah.
Well, she couldn't know what was going on. She was on the run. She was afraid the bad guys were after her. They were constantly on the run during those years, which is why Sasha never learned to make friends, because they were moving too frequently. Son was terrified that she was going to get caught and dragged back. So she did not know what was going on, and she wouldn't have been able to handle it because she was an interloper. She was an Earth person. So
right.
Sasha was the one who was born over there, but brought to Earth and raised on Earth. So she had dual citizenship.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you get the idea to have interworld travel happen?
That happened when I was a little kid. I was 8. When the first stories I wrote were about a group of adventuring girls. And
I think I've read some of those.
Okay, well then Claire, the white-haired one, would come looking for girls to adopt because she was lonely. She came to Earth and found CJ and took her back to the other world. So that was there from the beginning. World hopping.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense with like wanting to escape and wanting to be someplace better than where you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I was young, I was always looking for fantasy books with kids going out of the world. But in those days, the publishing world was stricter, and they always had to come back and be content with their lives at home. And the ones I hated the worst, they forgot what happened to them. Oh, that was such a betrayal. Any book that ended like that, I would never read again.
There are a lot of good ones that I read when I was growing up. And I think they were published even before Harry Potter sort of made it more mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the 80s, YA was blossoming even before Harry Potter. Of course, that caused an exponential. That lifted the lid on the 60,000 word limit, because before then, publishers insisted that kids wouldn't read any book longer than 60,000 words. All of us knew that was a bunch of hooey, but
yeah,
that was the rule.
The longer books were actually better because it took you longer to read it.
And you had more time in the story, more depth.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So what one book that you've read has influenced you the most?
It's hard to say because different ones had profound influence at different periods of my life. I
Mm.
would say as a kid, Enid Blyton, because she wrote adventure stories about kids who managed to get away from the adults and take the villains on themselves. And
Hmm.
the girls were as active as the boys. Um, now, now when I look at those, they're so badly written and so full of racial stereotypes and so forth that I can't read them anymore. But as a kid, that stuff just went over my head, and
Hmm.
I reveled in those stories about kid adventures. So those had a tremendous influence on me. I was already writing about my world before I discovered Lord of the Rings at 14. But I think what Lord of the Rings did for me was show that, yes, you can have depth, you can take it seriously, uh, you can go as deep as you want, and it's just going to get better.
Yeah.
My inclination was that way already, but then I had conviction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another world you can get lost in
Oh, yes.
very easily.
Yeah.
There's so much. And he spent so long doing so many different things related to it that you can
Well,
go in little circles and
he was writing that project for 40 years,
yeah.
drip by drip.
So we'll have that to look forward to with your world. Um so so each of the books that I've read in this world are very, if they're connected to each other, they're almost tangentially connected, except for the ones that happen to have the same character showing up in a different place. Do you ever do you ever have like plans to make a almost like a history of this world that chronologically places the different stories in the different countries as like a map?
Well, there's a timeline. There are a couple of timelines actually up on the Sartorius Delis page,
Okay.
which uh, a friend set up for me. So there are several different timelines. A story timeline, one from the Marlevins, and one just general. So it's all there.
Okay.
There's also
Awesome.
a tree on my website that shows where the different stories are in relation to each other. The kid ones and the adult ones, and the ones kind of in between.
Yeah. So one thing that really struck me, because I started with Crown Duel and then like explored from there. And um most authors can't change their writing style when the characters in their books are different ages. But you do it very well. I was really impressed by your kids one, um, because it sounded like kids, and like the way that they were talking about how to figure out the problems that they were facing was very authentic to what someone of that age range would actually be doing and how they would actually be thinking about it. So does that have to do with you writing those stories when you were that age, or yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense.
I tried really hard to keep the voice and the jokes and everything that I wrote as a kid, which has its pluses and minuses. If you go and look at reviews, and I do that once in a great while when I can nerve myself to it, people just hate them. Even though I say everywhere,
But they're so wonderful.
I wrote them as a kid. I wrote them as a kid. I wrote these as a kid. Do not expect anything better because it's kid stories written by a kid. But whatever, they're out there. I did have one librarian come to me at a con about 5 years ago and asked when the next CJ book was going to come out. He said, I have a little group of kids at my library who just love those books. And I was really gratified because I thought I was writing them and putting them out into a black hole.
No.
I've got to get the other ones. I've got to catch up and get the other ones caught up. You know,
I can sort of understand why someone who's a YA reader who maybe doesn't spend a lot of time with children would be disappointed in those books.
yes.
But I think as soon as you have kids or your friends have kids or you're back, you know, interacting with children again, you'll be like, "Oh, this is awesome." Because it's so true to how they think and the types of banter that they come up with. Yeah. So, what do I want to ask next? There's so many things I could ask. Let's see. Do you have a favorite of these stories?
The one that's closest to my heart hasn't come out yet.
Really?
And it took 25 years to write the first draft. Another 10 years before I could write the second draft. And now I'm ready to write the last draft, but unfortunately, 5 books have to come out before it. I hope I live long enough for it to come out.
So, are you waiting for that one to come out because you wanted your writing to improve, or because there are other books in the series that need to be there in order for that one to really make sense?
Yep.
So was that the first piece of the story that you sort of discovered, or did it come later?
No, it came in my 20s. One image, and I fought against it because I didn't want it to happen. And it kept coming back, so I knew that it was true. And when I say true, I can't change any of these things when I rewrite them. What happened. What I can change is how I write about it. And
right.
In that sense, I'm doing radical rewrites of the material that I wrote in my late teens and early 20s. I have to, because it's terrible. But the events are the same events. So somebody I really, really liked gets killed. And I just did not want that to happen. I tried hard to imagine other things, but no, I kept coming back to that. And then finally, I saw what happens afterwards. And the longer story, it brings such joy and redemption to a couple of characters that I realized there was a reason for that event. And there was a purpose for me to write the story, but it was a hard one to write.
Yeah. 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 So you have 5 more books before you can write that one.
Well, let's see. The Young Allies, 3 books have to come out. Then the romance book where 2 main characters find love. And then the 3 war books with a couple of novellas kind of supporting them. And then there's one odd one. And then that one. So actually it's more than 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it won't make any sense at all to a reader who hasn't seen what happens to the characters in the earlier ones.
Yeah. So does just that Sasharia, does it happen, do the events in that happen before or after the world chronology of Crown Jewel?
Oh, quite a bit after.
After?
Where's the timeline? Here it is. Okay, Crown Jewel happens in the year 749. Sasha's is in 54. And then the
Okay.
war happens in 57. So it's one of the last ones before the Northunder War.
Okay. Okay. I'm starting to see how all of these have fit together. I've like read random ones and not all of everything that you've published yet because time. But I'm starting to get a picture of how everything fits together, which is exciting. I like it when I get to sort of be a detective as I read. I like that. Which is really funny because I'm not a huge fan of mysteries. I mean, I read them and I enjoy them, but my go-to like standard default genre is fantasy, and then my second one is tied for science fiction and romance.
Yeah, me too. But I love finding little trails through.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of fun too when you read multiple books and they're not necessarily related. Like you could read either one of them without it affecting what you know about the other one, but then you find little hints of things.
Yes.
And then you're like, ooh, that's this, and ooh, that's that. That's always fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what was your favorite part about writing Sasharia?
Oh, that one? I think my favorite part were the shipboard scenes. Another favorite part was when Sun is trying to convince Canardan and that Sasha is a clumsy. She's trying to protect her daughter, so she's completely ragging, making up all the stuff about how clumsy she is and her temper's so bad, and that she was having fun. I was having fun writing that. Let's see. Another part I really enjoyed writing was the boys when they're on their first adult mission. sort of become to realize that their mission is really, really wrong. And what are they going to do about it?
Yeah.
That.
So let's see. So there are two potential guys, and it's a mystery which one of them is the good guy, right?
Well, I don't want to go into spoiler territory.
Right. I'm trying to avoid the spoiler territory. My question is, what was fun about writing about them and making it, I guess, ambiguous or giving little hints that made it not ambiguous at the end?
I guess it's just part of the fun. I didn't think of that as specifically fun, because you have to think about when you're doing something like that, even if the reader, because some readers guess right away what's going on and others are surprised, but for either type of reader, you've got to write it in such a way that when they get to the end, if they go back and reread it, they don't hit a false note. Everything has to support the big reveal. So you're always thinking about that.
Yeah.
I guess that's the kind of fun that is building a puzzle.
Yeah, yeah. As opposed to solving a puzzle.
Yeah,
and it can be harder to make a puzzle than to solve it.
Yeah, it's a different type of creativity than writing an action scene or writing a romantic scene or a humorous scene, or you are having to think ahead to the end constantly to make sure that the continuity is right.
Yeah. I'm thinking about everything and being excited. So what do we enjoy the most as we read Sasharia En Garde?
What was that?
What do you hope we enjoy the most?
Everything. I hope that older readers will like having an older woman get to actually go on an adventure. I want people to like Sasha, even though she's not cute and small and dainty. I want people to enjoy all the characters, even the minor ones, because they all have lives.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm excited. And the giveaway is still running. If anyone hears this, there's a link. There should be a link below the video to the giveaway, and I'll be sharing the link more on social media and everything to that. So yeah.
Excellent.
I think it closes on Friday. I want to say it closes on Friday, or maybe Wednesday. Will be a good thing to know. When does the thing end? Let's see. Detective work.
I think it said the 9th. That would be Wednesday.
Yeah. So you've got a little bit over a day from when we're recording this to enter. And so one person will get the ebook, the audiobook, and a print copy, and then 2 people will get the ebook and the audiobook. So if you like Sherwood's work as much as I do, then you should definitely enter that giveaway. All right. And we'll have the discussion later this month, and I'll be letting everyone know about that once I know what my schedule is going to be like. And if you're available, you're welcome to come back.
Oh, sure. I enjoy that. Just lost.
Yeah, the discussion is spoiler full, so we can go into as much depth about the book as we want to.
It's much fun when you can do that.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and we will be back.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to it.